current systems begin to break down. And so, yes, there is this kind of disorderliness that's taking place globally, whether it's the environment, whether it's politics, whether it's economics, whether it's religion, education, journalism, the medical model. It's all kind of coming apart. And there has to be something new that has to replace it. So as certain things begin to break down, we have to make a choice to how to create order out of that disorder. And we can't respond to those conditions with anger. We can't respond to those conditions with hatred or fear, because that's the very consciousness that's driving it in the first place. So we're seeing this kind of extreme reality where there's a polarization between both worlds. And I think it's healthy. And so the optimism that I have is that if you teach people then how to be able to become more self-dependent and teach them that they have the resources to heal their body or to create opportunities in their lives, they can begin to take the energy of that disorderliness, and by creating more coherence and brain coherence and heart coherence in the midst of when everything else is collapsing, I think then you'll begin to see changes that people will begin to execute and create something greater. So I'm hopeful that everything that we're doing, in the world is giving people the tools. It's giving them tools to begin to apply to their lives. So the only way that change is going to take place is if you see the evidence of the collapse right in front of you. I think the challenge is that people have to wake up. And the question is, how uncomfortable do you have to become before you make up your mind to change something? And I'm not just talking about individuals. I'm talking about the living organism of the species of human beings. And so with information comes knowledge. And when you learn new information, you become aware of what you were unaware of. And awareness is consciousness, and consciousness is commingled with a change in energy. So there's this kind of energetic change going on in the planet, and we have to learn how to use that energy and to harness it and reorganize it. In fact, I believe that that energy is endorsing who you're being. So then, whatever your belief is, whether you're believing it's the end of the Mayan calendar and the beginning of a new house, or there's changes going on in the solar flares, or whatever your belief is, that energy that's taking place right now can be used to endorse. If you're fearful, you're going to experience more fear or more anxiety. If you're using that energy and learning how to create order out of it, it's going to endorse some greater outcome for you, whether it's health or wealth or whatever you're after in your life. So the polarity or the extremity that's being created, I think, is necessary for something greater to happen. And as I've said in the past, you don't try to fix this. We just figure out a way to create something better. And when you create something better, everybody leaves this and naturally goes here. It's just antiquated. So we got to get really sharp and see through the illusion of what's taking place. And I just don't want to wait till it gets so uncomfortable that it's too late to begin to act. And that's kind of what drives me more than anything else. I'm not sure I believe anything that I see on television any longer. I'm just not sure that it's actually factual. And I travel around the world, and whatever place or country or city that I'm in, there's a general sense of goodness with people. I think people are wired to care for one another, to take care of one another, to inform one another, to support one another, to heal one another, to give to one another. I think we're wired that way. And I think that if you want to diminish that kind of virtuistic behavior, you create the stress hormones, and you create fear, you create hostility, you create anger, you create pain, you create suffering. And it's those emotions that begin to create separation. Now I don't trust you any longer, because in survival, you have to take care of yourself. In survival, it becomes a very selfish set of chemicals that cause to endorse our ego. So I think that in this current time, we have to be able to rise above those emotional states. And when you do, you're no longer controlled. I think the best way to control people is to control their emotions. And when you can control their emotions, of course, you're going to keep their attention moving from one thing to the next. And while everybody's looking at all of this drama, something else is going on over here, and I'm more interested in looking at that. And so I don't really look at journalism the same way. I don't look at the media the same way, because I don't necessarily believe that I'm getting the whole story. So people are angry about that. And I think the anger is good when it's seen as an energy of disturbance, but that should motivate us to act or to do something about it. And it's that whole analogy of the frog in the boiling water. You just get desensitized, you get more desensitized, you get more desensitized, and at what point do you start burning? At what point do you start realizing it's getting a little too hot? I just think we have to get to that point now. So by creating something for people to utilize, that you're not relying on so many things outside of you to bring you joy, or this kind of subconscious program of being a victim. You say, Brian, why are you so upset today? Well, I'm upset because of this person or this thing. What that really means is that some person or some condition in your environment is controlling the way you're feeling and the way you're thinking. Well, if something is outside of you is controlling the way you feel and the way you think, you're a victim to your environment. And so then there is this dramatic polarity that goes on. When things are going well, you're happy. When things aren't going well, you're sad. But when you learn how to self-regulate and create more coherence in your brain and heart, and that's what our message is, then you're no longer dependent on your outer world controlling your mood. In fact, you begin to realize how you think and feel begins to produce effects in your outer life. Now you start believing more you're the creator of your life and less of the victim of your life. Now that isn't something that you take one bite of and swallow and it's all over. It's a process of repatterning. It's a process of rewiring. It's a process of reconditioning. It's a process of self-reflection and awareness and changing those beliefs. And that's the work. And yet people are doing it. So when you begin to realize then, well, I can't respond to the same conditions in my life with the same emotions and the same thoughts, because if I believe that the way I feel and the way I think creates reality, if I'm reacting to the same thoughts and feelings equal to the conditions in my life in the same way, then I keep reaffirming the same life. So then a person has to retreat from their life, retreat from their environment, disconnect from their outer world, and begin to lay down patterns neurologically in their brain so that their brain is no longer a record of the past. They're priming their brain and beginning to lay down the circuitry for them to think in different ways, to begin to close their eyes and rehearse who they're going to be in that day. And the act of mentally rehearsing begins to install the neurological hardware in their brain. So their brain looks like the experience is already happening or has already happened. Now the brain's no longer a record of the past. Now we're creating a map to the future. I'm interested in the supernatural, the supernormal. And I believe, from my present state of ignorance, of course, if we're going to use the word belief, that you don't have to be a Buddhist monk. You don't have to be a nun with 40 years of devotion. You don't have to be a religious scholar. You don't have to be a researcher. You don't have to have a PhD to do this. That common people around the world can do the uncommon. And if they're given the right understanding and the environment is set up where they can begin the application of that. And I have looked at over 1,000 brain scans of people in meditation. And I can tell you that you and I are at our absolute best when we get beyond our analytical mind. When we get beyond ourselves. That's the moment that the brain gets so organized and so coherent. The front of the brain's talking to the back of the brain, the right side of the brain's talking to the left side of the brain. There's this synchronization, this psychic union going on.
Like a flow.
And the person has tears of joy rolling down their face. That gestalt moment, that transcendent event for the person is completely subjective. But my interest is measuring that subjective experience.
True.
And we're capturing amplitudes of energy in people's brains that are 26,000 to 40,000 times normal during that experience. Now, They can't make their brain do that. It's happening to them. And the inner event that's happening to them is more real than any past event. And that's the moment I know their belief is changing. I think there's a strong intellectual division going on in the world right now, because some people are holding on to old paradigms and old beliefs. And look, if we're measuring normal, we're going to get normal. I mean, for years, the idea that you couldn't grow new brain cells or couldn't change the brain in some way, that was a belief. And you know why? Because the scientist that was doing the experiment was studying rodents in an unchanging environment. How could there ever be any new connections or new circuitry or new brain cells if there's no new experiences? So I think in the age of information, in the age of technology, ignorance is a choice. And people are beginning to go, hey, I don't need my doctor to tell me about this. I can get on the internet and read it. Hey, I'm going to read a book on quantum physics and I'm going to ask the mysterious questions. I'm going to step outside of convention myself. So once you step outside of convention, you will be considered foolhardy or insane until you're able to produce some type of change. Then you're considered a saint, a holy man, a mystic, a genius. Dare to be original. So I think the camp is divided in a very big way. That's the reason why I'm doing all the measurements. Yeah. Because I want people to understand that the person that healed themselves of that condition, that traumatic brain injury, I want to show you that their brain is better. They're not just saying I feel better. No, they are better. I want them to see that. Now, they didn't do that with a drug. They didn't do that with a therapy. They didn't do that with anything except by thought alone. And they made those biological changes. So, to answer the question, the camp is divided in many ways. The old paradigms, and then the new understandings and the new paradigms. And then there's this little kind of bridge in between, and we're only as good as the people that are willing to execute it. In other words, you got to be skilled at this, right? You got to be skilled at this. So if you're not skilled at it, we're not going to see any changes. So imagine 500 people or 450 people coming to an event, a workshop, and we are going to help them cross that river and to become conscious of their unconscious thoughts. You know, the ones that say, you can't, it's too hard, this will never happen, I can't change, I'm too this, I'm too old, I'm too that. Get beyond what their habits are, what they say unconsciously. Do they complain? Do they blame? Do they make excuses? Do they feel sorry for themselves? They're a program. They talk about others. Then look at their emotional states. Oh my God, I've been guilty for the last 30 years. I didn't even know I was guilty. It just felt like me. I've been unworthy. I didn't even know I was unworthy. It just felt like who I am. And all of a sudden, they start becoming conscious of that. And then they start creating a new change for themselves. And one by one, you start seeing these breakthroughs. You start measuring those breakthroughs. You get people on the stage talk about their breakthroughs, show their brain scan, show their heart rate monitor, show the energy change. And I guarantee you, just like an infection can create a disease in a community, I believe that wellness can be as infectious as disease. And you start seeing traumatic changes happening in a small community of people who are outside of the conditioning of their environment. The science has to be done to measure it, but the measurements are only as good as our students. And if they're not doing the work, if they're not developing the ability to sustain brainwave states, if they're not getting beyond their analytical mind, because what separates the conscious mind from the subconscious mind is the analytical mind. And if a person doesn't get beyond their analytical mind, they'll still think within their belief. And I've measured enough brains to tell you is that when you think within your belief, or you think within those limited emotions, you are going to make your brain worse, without a doubt. It's only when you transcend that analytical mind that you start falling in to those subconscious programs and you begin to step into the autonomic nervous system where you can change your chemistry and your biology. So then if our students aren't good at doing that, then it's still a philosophical concept, pie in the sky principles. But what we want to do is we want to give people the knowledge, the information, and blend the sciences of possibility, whether it's quantum physics or neuroplasticity or neuroendocrinology or epigenetics or whatever it is, hormonal changes, psychoneuroimmunology. We want to give them the information and have them reason it. We want them to be able to turn to someone next to them and explain what they just learned, so they wire it in there. Sure. We want to give them the instruction and have them review the instruction, and then we want to put them into the experience. Not everybody is going to have the experience, but all we need is a few. And if that person or a series of people have that experience, that transformation, and we measure that transformation, that's more information to teach transformation the next time, because I can understand what took place. So our work is only as good as our students' ability to regulate and change those states. But I do know that if you give people the opportunity and they have enough times in their environment to apply it, you'll start seeing those transformations occur. And now we're stepping outside the paradigm of the human beings are limited, they're powerless, they need these external things to take care of them. I think it's time that we start taking a little bit more responsibility for these things and seeing if we're able to do it in a practical, measurable way. We're doing everything we can to say, are we doing this right, you know? But we are capturing anomalous things.
Awesome.
And those anomalous things are causing people to scratch their head. I mean, as an example, you'll see a strip chart on a brain scan and you'll see like, oh, that's beta, oh, that's alpha, oh, there's theta going on there, oh, a little gamma there. But when you're studying a brainwave and all of a sudden if you took a group of Crayola crayons and you went like that, and it just looked like a snowstorm where you couldn't see any measurements, how were you going to measure that? We had to go through this whole process of figuring out a way to measure the amount of energy in a person's brain, their entire brain when that occurs. And so we've had to figure out ways for our understanding, because we're measuring the supernatural, to just go, wow, that's a lot of energy in a person's brain. Have you ever seen that before? No. That looks like it could be a seizure. Oh, really? Well, that person's wearing an HRV monitor. If they're having a seizure, their heart would be going crazy. But for 1 hour, their heart is in absolute love. That's anomalous. It only takes a few of those, and you start scratching your head and saying, well, God, we've been so conditioned. We're studying normal so much. We're studying depression. We're studying anxiety, cyclic mood problems, traumatic brain injuries. We're studying normals. And I'm not interested in normal. I'm not interested in natural. I'm interested in supernatural and supernormal. Sure. And that stuff means that if that person once, twice, 3 times, we're seeing it over and over again. We're seeing a trend now. Well, if it's happening over and over again, then we know that something is possible for a human being. And when you see those energetic changes in the brain in a person who's had uterine fibroids or chronic pain or serious depression, and one meditation come out of that meditation and be healed, that's because the inner event was real. They were having a full-on sensory experience without their senses. And that's the transformation.